From accidents to cover-ups to financial malfeasance, and all the resulting deaths, this is the twisty timeline of the Murdaugh family murders. In July 2015, 19-year-old Stephen Smith was driving home from a night class at Orangeburg Calhoun Technical College when he ran out of gas. He attempted to make it the rest of the way on foot when he was fatally struck by another vehicle, specifically the mirror of a truck. The accident killed him, and the driver ran off. This, at least, was the initial conclusion around Smith's death, though his mother, Sandy, never accepted this version. She believed instead that her son, a gay man, had been taken from his car and killed by a group of fellow students, including an individual that Smith had been in a brief relationship with. 6 years later, Smith's death became tied into the Murdaugh family story as the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division began its own investigation. Rumors about a member of the Murdaughs being involved in Smith's death and a possible cover-up had been spreading through the community since 2015.
Nobody's looking for answers. Stevens had no justice.
In February 2018, a 911 call was made from the Murdaugh family home in Islandton, South Carolina. Maggie Murdaugh reported that Gloria Satterfield, their housekeeper and nanny, fell while walking up the brick steps up to the house and was bleeding from her head. An ambulance was dispatched, but by the time Satterfield reached the hospital, she was pronounced dead. The Murdaugh family reportedly blamed the fall on one of their dogs, but there was no report from the coroner nor any autopsy performed. Alec Murdaugh advised Satterfield's sons to sue him with a hand-picked attorney to reach a settlement of $505,000 from insurance. The sons never received the money, prompting a civil suit against Murdaugh in 2021. A year later, Murdaugh confessed that the Satterfields were due $4.3 million from him. It was part of a pattern of financial crimes he'd perpetuated for years, in which he laundered settlement money for victims to serve his own ends. On the night of February 24, 2019, Paul Murdaugh, the younger son of Alec and Maggie, was involved in a boating accident. Paul and a group of his friends were underage drinking when they took his family boat out for a high-speed spin and eventually crashed into a bridge. The boat split apart, and one of the passengers went missing. A week later, 19-year-old Mallory Beach was found dead. A flurry of lawsuits followed. Beach's family sued both Paul and the liquor store that sold him the alcohol, and Paul's friend Connor Cook sued Alec Murdaugh, whom he claimed tried to frame him to cover up Paul's culpability. Paul also faced indictments on 3 charges, to which he pleaded not guilty, but his murder in 2021 happened before the case could go to trial. Prior to being accused of the murders himself, Alec suggested that the boating incident was a possible motive for someone wanting to kill his son. As Alec's trial for that murder began, a settlement was reached concerning the accident, as Maggie Murdaugh's estate was split between her surviving son Buster, Beach's family, and the survivors of the crash.
Last name is Beach. Now.
About 1 month before her death, Maggie Murdaugh allegedly met with a divorce lawyer in Charleston, South Carolina. She reportedly intended to leave her husband Alec and get a clearer picture of the family's finances. This, at least, was the version of the story reported by People magazine in September 2021. However, the Murdaugh family strongly disputed this characterization of the Murdaughs' marriage. They indicated that such claims were a distraction from investigations into the deaths of Maggie and her son Paul. The Daily Mail reported via anonymous sources that Maggie and Alec had routinely argued over money and that she'd confronted him over his drug use. Furthermore, while Paul was facing charges over the 2019 boating accident, his summer vacation was approaching, and Maggie reportedly feared that he would fall back into bad habits. She also reportedly sought to keep him near her as she minded the family dog kennels so that she could keep tabs on him. On June 7, 2021, Alec, Maggie, and Paul Murdaugh were at the family hunting lodge in Colleton County. Around 10 o'clock that night, Alec reportedly placed a frantic call to 911 and said that his wife and son had been shot. The next day, authorities confirmed that Maggie and Paul had been killed near the dog kennels on the property, both having been shot multiple times. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division immediately began an investigation. Information about the deaths was initially tightly controlled, with no named suspects and no indication of whether there was a larger threat to the nearby area. Tensions in Colton County ran high. The coroner's report was released several weeks afterwards, and it confirmed that mother and son had been killed by 2 separate firearms. The initial public response by the Murdaugh family to the killings of Maggie and Paul was a statement of gratitude to well-wishers. As national attention intensified, 2 members of the family spoke with ABC News. Alec's brothers, Randy and John Murdaugh, appeared to suggest that a possible motive for the murders was anger at Paul over the boating accident.
Can't imagine the horror that's my brother's experiencing.
Alec and his surviving son Buster issued another statement on June 25, 2021. They declared that they were prepared to offer $100,000 to anyone who provided information leading to the arrest of the killer. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division created a special hotline for any tips pertaining to the case. Just a few months after the murders became national news, Alec Murdaugh's long history of shady dealings began coming to light. It started when a questionable check was found on September 2nd on his desk at the law firm that the Murdaughs had helped found. The next day, it was revealed that Murdaugh had been siphoning funds from the firm into a bank account for a non-existent organization. The amount pilfered reportedly totaled millions of dollars, and much of it was used by Murdaugh to fund an addiction to oxycodone. Confronted with evidence of his crimes, Murdaugh offered a prompt resignation from the firm, which moved to reimburse those cheated by him. But the extent of his fraud was still unclear a month later. The firm sued him on October 5th, seeking actual and punitive damages. On September 4th, 2021, just one day after his resignation, Alec Murdaugh pulled off the road in Hampton County to change a tire. A truck reportedly came up behind him and asked about his car. The driver then drew a gun, shot Murdaugh in the head, and drove off. The officer at the scene initially reported Murdaugh as having no injuries. A note later amended after Murdaugh claimed that he had a fractured skull. But just over a week later, Murdaugh confessed that the shooting had been set up. He'd arranged for a drug dealer, Curtis Edward Smith, to kill him. If the scheme had worked, his life insurance would have awarded Buster Murdaugh with $10 million. Smith was arrested in connection with the attempted suicide, but he was quick to challenge Murdaugh's claims. He told the New York Post that they were cousins, that he never supplied Murdaugh with drugs, and that he never shot him or anybody else. Instead, he claimed that he was called by Murdaugh, who had also been Smith's lawyer at one time, from the roadside for help. When Smith arrived, Murdaugh had a gun and seemed as if he might kill himself. In a tussle over the weapon, it fired, and Smith claimed that he had fled in a panic.
What percent are you positive that he didn't get shot? If you could put a percentage on it.
1,000.
The charges against Alec Murdaugh continued to mount. A warrant was issued for his arrest in September for insurance fraud. He voluntarily surrendered, was freed on $20,000 bond, and went out of state for treatment for drug addiction. But after completing rehab in Florida that October, he was arrested by local authorities and extradited to South Carolina to face additional charges related to a settlement over his housekeeper's death. Fresh indictments against Murdaugh and Curtis Edward Smith came in November. Both men were charged with conspiracy and attempts to falsely claim payment, with Murdaugh facing additional charges of filing a false police report. Smith was also accused of assault and battery related to assisted suicide. By April 2022, Murdaugh reportedly faced 27 total charges pertaining to money laundering and forgery, among others. New claims regarding the settlement for his housekeeper were raised, as was a scheme to defraud a former patrolman. The picture of the financial crimes painted by these charges indicated that they went as far back as 2015. As the extent of Alec Murdaugh's misdeeds came to light, his ability to maintain his license to practice law looked increasingly tenuous. In October 2021, a friend of his named Corey Fleming had his law license temporarily suspended. Fleming had known Murdaugh since college and had been recommended by him in several cases related to the Murdaugh family. In particular, Murdaugh recommended Fleming to both the family of housekeeper Gloria Satterfield and to a survivor of the 2019 boating accident. The connection between the two men went unmentioned at the time and later led to lawsuits against Fleming. Murdaugh's turn came on July 12, 2022. He'd already admitted to some of the charges against him, and he and his attorneys were aware that he was about to face murder accusations. Based on what he'd already admitted to, the South Carolina Supreme Court moved to disbar him.
He is no longer fit to practice law.
By the summer of 2022, Alec Murdaugh was a disgraced man. He'd been disbarred, compelled to resign, uncovered as a swindler and an addict, and charged with a series of indictments. The investigation into his financial crimes had reopened the old wound of his housekeeper's death, and the murders of his wife and son had prompted a fresh look at the death of a local teenager. And then on July 14th, it got even worse, as he was charged with the murders of his wife Maggie and his son Paul. Initial reporting didn't immediately reveal why prosecutors had decided to target Murdaugh, and he immediately pleaded not guilty. Even as his other misdeeds were exposed and he admitted to them, he consistently maintained that he played no part in his wife and son's deaths. But by December, prosecutors were arguing that those murders were a calculated act by Alec to win sympathy and divert attention from impending exposure of his duplicitous finances. Alec Murdaugh went on trial for the murder of his wife and son on January 23, 2023, with a target end date of February 10th. The trial was being held in Walterboro, South Carolina, where his family had long served as legal counsel. This posed some challenges to the proceedings. A portrait of Murdaugh's grandfather in the courtroom had to be removed, and the pool of potential jurors included individuals with connections to the Murdaughs. Murdaugh maintained his innocence regarding the murder charges in his opening statement. The prosecution, meanwhile, argued that the killings were a consequence of his long history of financial crimes, whereby the deaths of his family members would provide him with a distraction from scrutiny. The prosecution further alleged that his alibi that he was visiting his parents was questionable, and that audio from Paul Murdaugh's phone would confirm his father's presence on the scene just before the murders. The defense dismissed the idea of dodging white-collar crimes through murder as ridiculous and reminded the jury of the principle of innocent until proven guilty. If you or anyone you know needs help with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP 4357.